Most nonprofit leaders that I meet with, when you ask them how their organization is doing, many of them will say, we're thriving, right? But when you dig deeper and you look under the hood, much of what I find is almost the total opposite. They're often surviving or maintaining, and that difference is costing them more than they realize. Is your organization surviving, maintaining, or thriving? That's our focus on this episode. Let's huddle up. Hey, welcome to another episode of Huddle Up with Mark, the Fund Coach. I'm Mark Duncan. Before I get started with today's topic, I want to make you aware of a special offer that is in place right now through the end of September. As you know, I have a course called the Relationship Fundraising Method Master Course. It is a course that is filled with about 30 training videos, about 7 modules of 30 training videos that takes you through everything that you need to know to be successful in relationship fundraising. You'll also learn how to master your message. You'll understand the importance of having the right money mindset. You'll understand how to use your database in a way that is going to be powerful, not just for relationship fundraising, but for all aspects of fundraising and much, much more. Right now, that is a special running for $100 off the regular price. It's regularly $497, and it is $397 through the end of September. If this is something you're interested in, click the link below. If you're listening to this, you'll see a link in the description on the audio version of the podcast. Hope you take advantage of it. Hope you enjoy it. Now, let's talk about the topic today. I want to break down the definition of the 3 categories that I just talked about: surviving, maintaining, and thriving. Which are you? Where does your organization fall? Let's talk about surviving first. Surviving is when you're in this state of you're constantly reacting, you're constantly putting out fires, you're barely making payroll, you're depending on the next big grant or maybe a big gift just to keep the lights on. And what happens is there's this lack of sustainable funding, there's a fear of asking, there's an over reliance on 1 or 2 major revenue streams, and your leadership is typically reactive leadership as opposed to proactive. Is this where you are? And I know this is going to take a lot of self analysis and self reflection. These will be hard questions to answer. All I ask is that you be honest with yourself about where you are. If you are in this survival mode, then you probably are experiencing a lot of stress. There's burnout. There's the inability to plan long term. You may be experiencing a lot of staff turnover, or you may not even be able to acquire staff, right? You haven't been able to grow enough to be able to bring on staff people. You may have to cut programs, and you have this sort of this scraping by mentality. And the impact that this mode has on organizations is that you rarely grow your mission when you're in this mode. You're stuck. You feel like you're shrinking, and it's hard to pull yourself out of it. That's the survival mode. Is this you? Now, many of you may be in the maintaining mode. You're stable but stagnant. You're able to make payroll, programs are running, but you're really not running at a pace where you're ready to grow. But your bills are getting paid, fundraising is happening, but not much is really changing. And what happens is you get so comfortable with the status quo that you actually begin to fear taking risks, fear doing anything new because you don't want to spoil the status quo. Everything's okay. Why would we bother taking risks? We've always done it this way. And sometimes leaders who are running organizations in this maintaining mode, they confuse stability with success. Now, donors will sense this. You start building relationships with high capacity individuals, or even when you're soliciting in mass, you're likely going to see a lot of donor um, stagnancy. They're going to get complacent because they're going to sense that complacency in you as a leader and in the organization. Staff will start to lose energy if they haven't done so already. Opportunities are going to be missed. And you're going to start feeling pressure from competitive nonprofit organizations who may be climbing a step or two or three or four ahead of you. But the impact of this is when you maintain this, it feels safe, but it does erode vision for the organization, especially over time, eventually leading back to survival mode, which is the mode just beneath maintaining, if you leave it unchecked. Now, let's talk about thriving. What does a thriving organization look and feel like? First of all, if your organization is thriving, you are constantly living, both you, the board, and staff are constantly living in a state of growth and abundance. Leader is usually very confident, leads with that confidence, proactive when it comes to fundraising, and there's visionary board engagement. Boards are operating at that 30,000 foot level. That's a good indicator of a thriving organization. I always say when board members are operating at 30,000 feet and the executive leadership is operating somewhere around 5,000 feet and the staff is on the ground, that is a recipe for success. That is a recipe for thriving. But if your board members are down here at 5,000 feet, operating alongside the executive leadership, perhaps second guessing, inquiring about the day to day, inquiring about why they made this decision to purchase this, why they made this decision to hire that person. And then the board then becomes this sort of pseudo staff. And what's even worse is when the board is operating on the ground. Now, what I mean by that is your board members can volunteer and engage in programmatic activities, event related activities to make sure that they're executed well. But if your board is involved with the day to day operations of the organization, then you've got a problem. And some of you may be watching this and listening to this and say, well, we're small, we're just getting started. We need to have our board, involved. Okay, I get that. But you must create a plan so that they can be operating at the 30,000-foot level. Because when they're up here, when they're visionary, and you're feeding them, you as the leader are feeding them with things to promote that vision. Now you're talking about creating a culture in the organization that is only going to advance and grow and prosper. But when you're hanging out, your board is hanging out in the ground, you will definitely wind up in survival mode. So that's really important. Now, why does this matter? Why does it matter where you fall, whether you're surviving or maintaining or thriving? Many of you may be maintaining and going, this is where we are and we're comfortable here. Thriving organizations, hands down, attract more donors. I'll say that again. Thriving organizations attract more donors. I want you to look around at many of the well-known nonprofit organizations. And yes, I'm even talking about large higher ed institutions, large hospitals, many of them you can probably name because they're so well known. It's because they're so well supported. And because they're set up in a way that they are thriving. They're constantly innovating, constantly thinking about better ways to provide services to the people they serve or solve the problem that they created the organization to solve. These are all things that you need in order to be a thriving organization. But it does attract major donors. And I'm not saying major donors are going to come flocking to you. Oh my gosh, you guys are doing great. Let me give you $1 million. No. You still need to lean into those organizations. Big gifts do not typically fall out of the sky. You've got to lean into those relationships, build trust, make the case, make the ask, and close the deal. But if your organization is thriving, you're going to already be attractive to that major donor prospect who may have started out as a transactional giver because they responded to either a direct mail or email solicitation or 24-hour giving campaign because they saw something that intrigued them. And maybe they sent you $250 or $500, right? And you thought, well, that's a nice sized gift. And usually when I say when donors give in that range, they're basically raising their hands and they're saying, hey, I'm here. If you do more, there'll be more coming. And that means if you lean in and establish that relationship with them, because that's essentially what they're looking for. And I don't mean that in terms of recognition. Don't confuse their desire to get to know you as a leader and the organization overall. Don't confuse that with them wanting their names plastered on buildings and all over your website. No. They are interested in supporting an organization that is winning. And the reason many organizations continue to have success in fundraising is because they're thriving and because it's attracting those major donors. And ultimately, those organizations are leaning in, building those relationships that are leading to those larger gifts. You're going to retain great staff. You're also going to expand your impact because It is fueled by clarity and confidence. See, when you're thriving, you're also telling your story in a way that is showing to the world what you're doing and the impact you're having. You're saving lives, you're changing lives, you're impacting lives, you're elevating lives, you're solving this problem. And donors will get on board with that. And thriving's not just more, doesn't just mean more money. It's the freedom to dream, the freedom to dream big, to innovate and serve your mission at the fullest capacity. So, surviving and maintaining can really be dangerous traps. Surviving drains energy and it shortens organizational life expectancy. Maintaining creates the illusion of safety while quietly eroding momentum. Both of these modes keep organizations from inspiring donors with bold vision. You want to maintain, then donors are going to give like you're maintaining. Even those that they have the capacity to give significant may say, I'm yes, I can certainly do 10,000, I can do 20,000, but I'm going to give you 5. Many of them will tell you that, and they'll tell you why. And it's because they want to see you do more, and it's not like more money is going to solve the problem. It's everything else that you do that's going to solve the problem. It's everything else that you are that's going to help turn the organization around from surviving and maintaining to thriving. And when you're in that surviving and maintaining mode, you wind up creating leadership fatigue, which affects the board, staff, and donors. Why is thriving the only real option? Thriving creates sustainability and momentum for the organization. Thriving sends a message to the community and the people that are being served by the organization that you're here to stay, you're here to grow, you are listening to the problems that you're solving, and you're not just reacting, but you are proactive in making sure that you're a step ahead of what you're aiming to do. Donors want to invest in thriving organizations, not ones that are clinging to survival or clinging to maintaining. You'll attract the right board members, the right partners, the right staff. I can go on and on and on. So if you're watching or listening to this, I want you to take an honest assessment of where you really are. Are you just surviving, literally living hand to mouth as an organization? Are you maintaining? Not much has changed. Generating the same amount of revenue, you got the same number of staff, you're doing the same programs, and you're not positioning yourself in a way that helps you take the organization to the next level. Your board is involved in some of the day-to-day decisions. Your board is weighing in on how you actually spend the money that's in your budget. You may be looking at me going, wait a minute. Of course our board is involved in how we spend money. Let me tell you a secret. It's not a secret. It's a best practice when it comes to your board and fundraising right? Your board plays a role in fundraising. They should be door opening for you. I think I've said that a number of times. But overall, your board again should be at that 30,000 foot level. Ideally, your board shouldn't necessarily be approving your budget by line item. Your board should simply say to you, here's how much money you, as the executive director, are allowed to spend. Use it in a way that is going to best advance our mission. That's it. And then you create a budget. And as long as you don't spend more than what you're allowed to spend, how you spend it should be up to you as a leader. Because if you're bound by line items and then all of a sudden something comes up and you want to make a purchase that you know you can afford, but your board is now stepping in and is going to approve whether or not you make that purchase and how you control the line items when you've already decided, well, we're actually not going to spend this much money here, here, and here. So we can take from here, here, and here and do this. And this is going to take us from here to here, especially when it comes to capacity building initiatives. Is that where your board is? Or is your board, do you need your board's approval for new purchases, new initiatives, even though you're able to figure it out? Give some thought to that. I know many of you right now are listening to this going, yeah, that's us. That's us. And I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm not saying you've done anything wrong, that your board is doing anything wrong. It's a culture. And sometimes it's a culture that exists prior to you coming into the role. And so sometimes we just come into a culture, fit in, and move on. When in essence, it's holding you back. So I hope this has been helpful to you. I'm going to be talking more about this in future episodes, this idea of surviving, maintaining, and thriving. And that each organization, each of you, especially if you're an executive director, you should be aiming to be an organization that is thriving. That you have an abundance mindset. You have enough money, enough resources, enough staff to be able to take risks so that you can do more for the people that you're serving. Hope this was helpful to you. Might have been hard to hear. Do that self-assessment. Ask yourself where you are, and then strive to thrive. As always, this fundraising thing that we do, it's not about the dollars. It's about what the dollars do for the people that you serve. Thanks. And we'll see you next time.